Nanna, thank you for joining me here today for our Women in Leadership, Women Who Make It Happen series.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Would you mind giving a brief introduction as to who you are, who you work for, and we can then talk about your career to date?
Absolutely. So I'm Nanna Bergmann. I work for the Bank of London as a Group Managing Director for Brand and Reputation. And as such, I oversee all of our marketing, our communications and corporate affairs.
Tell me more about the Bank of London, because this is relatively new, correct?
It is, correct.
So talk me through a little bit more about your role. It sounds really interesting.
So we are relatively new. We are a bank in the business-to-business space. We have come to market with quite a different proposition. So if you think about most of the banks that are already here, whenever they take your deposits or the deposits of a business, they would then lend it out or leverage it or invest it in any other financial vehicle. What that essentially does is that it creates a certain degree of risk, because obviously a bank that has a leveraged balance sheet is naturally more risky than one that does not. Yeah. And from my own personal experience, and obviously we all lived in the financial crisis where we really understood how interconnected this risk taking from banks is and how that can impact society. The same when we've seen the bank runs happen quite recently. My own personal experience with Silicon Valley Bank, where actually my partner who runs his own firm, they were a very happy customer of Silicon Valley Bank. But in the unfortunate events of the bank run, it's quite a stressful situation for them to not know how much funds could they have access to, when could they get access to it again. So a very difficult situation to be in for a small firm. What we do at the Bank of London is very different. We do not lend, we do not leverage any of the deposits that any client hold with us. Instead, we hold it 100% securely at the Bank of England in order to essentially offer a safer way to bank.
That is quite a new proposition.
It is
certainly
absolutely.
When we are saturated by lenders and...
It is a very new value proposition, and we can see it resonating exceptionally well in the market. We work with businesses in all shapes and sizes, but essentially offer three different kind of propositions out into the market. So we do agency clearing and payments, so essentially giving... Similar to ClearBank, so giving companies access to the payment rails and the interbank networks. We do banking as a service, so for any company that would want to embed the regulated banking products into their own offering, and then we bank customers or clients directly with us. So commercial banking for them to operate their own kind of day-to-day operating or financial operating needs. And across these kind of verticals, we really see that the value proposition is resonating exceptionally well in the market, which is fantastic to be a part of.
Good luck with it all. It sounds very exciting.
It is.
And your career, it's really interesting before you've joined the Bank of London. Because I know we've met before and talked a little bit about your background. Can you talk me through how you got to where you are today and some of the success factors that you think have been very prevalent in getting you here? Yeah,
absolutely. So interestingly, I think most career advice that I've always gotten has always been to learn to say no early on. And I know that's a very common career advice, and I actually disagree entirely. I think it's very important to say yes to the opportunities that present itself. And I think that's exactly what I've done throughout my career. I've always said yes to the quirky, fun things whenever I found them exciting. Granted, I do find a lot of things very exciting because I've got a huge appetite for learning, but it has taken me quite far or quite like different parts of the world into different industries through my career so far. So I've worked in strategic and commercial roles, and the go-to-market space is kind of really where I excel and where I really enjoy. However, I've been in consumer goods, I've been in big tech with Google, I'm now in banking, I've been with other kind of prop tech, fast growth startups. So I've been in quite lots of different types of industries. But I've just always said yes to whatever I found was fascinating and fun.
Well, I think that's a really good message to send out to younger females. We'll come on to that throughout. But I think your role now with the Bank of London, being in financial services, what differences have you seen there as opposed to the likes of Google and big tech, and you worked at Arla and more like retail?
Yeah.
So what have those differences been for you?
So it's obviously a highly regulated space. So we spend a lot more time on risk and compliance compared to any other company that I've worked for. And I love our risk and compliance team. Stephen Bell, who heads it up, and Hannah, one of my other fantastic colleagues, who's an expert in that space. We've got a really, really good team there. So fortunate on that. But that's a massive difference to any other company. Beyond that, I would actually say, if I think about, for instance, Google and that being big tech and then coming into the Bank of London, banking is a lot about data and moving numbers around. And in that sense, it's actually not that different. We learn a lot, and we like the Bank of London is probably different from an operational perspective compared to a traditional bank. We're a new bank, we're cloud native, we are a very kind of diverse set of people that are all kind of driven by what you can do with technology in the banking space. So we're probably different to a very traditional bank, and I haven't tried that space.
Yeah.
But therefore, in that space, it feels quite similar to working for someone like Google.
Yeah. Okay. Just touching on that diversity piece, I guess, because it does resonate like tech into banking. There is quite a diverse expertise in risk and compliance, really. The diversity for you and the bank when looking at talent, bringing it on, how have you found that? Or any challenges that have presented themselves?
Finance being a relatively traditional industry, it can be harder to find diversity in it. Again, I think I'm exceptionally fortunate to work in the firm that I'm working in, because our founder and chief executive, Anthony Watson, is a massive, genuine advocate for diversity. And it's not just playing lip service. He genuinely cares, and if he ever kind of spots anything that would discriminate in any way, he calls it out and stops it, right? He's really fantastic in that space, and that goes widely on the diversity agenda. So whilst it can still be difficult to find diverse talents, because this is an industry where they're sometimes far between, I think we're in a really fortunate space, and I like to believe that it also attracts more diverse talent when we have a leader that out in public kind of
promotes
it.
Yeah. And the diversity to you, what does that encompass?
Now we're speaking about female, of course, or women in fintech, right? So of course that's a diversity aspect. I think what's really important is that to be successful in a firm, you need diversity of thinking. And you get diversity of thinking by getting people with different backgrounds and experiences in life into the same firm, whether that be gender, race, ethnicity, whatever that may be, sexuality or just social mobility as well, simply coming from different parts of the world, right? That all brings in diverse thinking, and I think that's what's really important to be successful as a firm.
Yeah, and you've had the benefit, haven't you, of working in different countries. You've grown geographical remits. So.
Absolutely, it's fascinating actually when you. So yes, I've worked in Asia, I've worked in the Middle East, and I've worked in now in 4 or 5 countries across Europe. So it adds up, and diversity and that kind of different way of thinking is really prevalent when you come to any new kind of culture in any new country, and how it's being approached and how it's being kind of thought about. I think what I've learned is that you should never assume that people are thinking the same as you are, because it's so it's so easy when you're communicating. You're just thinking, of course, he is hearing exactly what I'm saying, but they're not. Because they are hearing it with whatever backgrounds that they bring into that conversation. And I think that's what I've really truly learned when I've been living in different countries. Never assume that the other person is hearing what you're saying.
It's a good way of looking at things, never assume.
Yeah.
Clearly there's the advocacy from the chief exec and from you. Can I ask then, obviously you're in a very senior leadership role, and what inspired you or what motivated you to become a leader in the first place?
Oh, that's a really good question. It's always come quite natural to me, so I don't think I've ever kind of thought about it.
It just happens.
It just happens. I guess, so actually funny, when I was in kindergarten and when I look at my kindergarten reports, I can see the teachers have kind of written up how I was the leader in the various games we were playing.
So from a very early age.
From a very early age.
Destined to be.
I don't know if that's true destiny, but look, I really like to kind of solve problems, and I think coming back to the diversity of thinking, that's the best way to solve problems in the right way. And when you are a leader, you have the privilege of getting access to more brains to solve your problems or to solve the problems that are at hand for the firm. So I think for me, it's just always been natural to kind of go in that direction. I've always been fascinated by leadership styles and how people lead.
What's yours? I was going to ask you. What's your leadership style?
So I keep not a diary, but I keep a long note book of, it's titled When I Become a CEO. And in that I write down observations from leaders around me. And I've done that for the last probably 8 years or so. What I see leaders do well, what I see leaders do less well. Lots of interesting points in that I can bring in one day when I become a CEO. My personal leadership style and what I really care about today is generating or creating psychological safety. It's the one thing that I took away from my job at Google. Google did a huge study I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I think it was titled Aristoteles, something like that, where they looked at hundreds of teams across functions, across geographies, to see which teams were the most successful in delivering their results and what was the common denominator for that success. And psychological safety is the most important to generate in a team.
What does that mean exactly? Excuse the naivety.
No, don't worry at all. So it means that your team feels safe to do and explore and are not afraid to fail. They actively kind of lean in, they actively lift because they are feeling psychologically safe. So you're not going to cut their head off just because they make a mistake. You're not going to throw them under the bus. You're not going to kind of put them out in public without them wanting it. It's for them to kind of feel confident and comfortable in whatever role they play so that they are willing to take chances and push further.
I think that would resonate with a lot of companies, certainly organisations throughout the UK, but just generally. So
I'm sure it would, yeah. It was something we really valued in Google, and it's actively practiced quite seriously. So I hope that my team feels psychological safe.
I'm sure they do. And so we're just waiting for the day when you'll become CEO then, Nanna, aren't we? Okay, so we've talked a little bit about your background and obviously the exciting role that you hold at the Bank of London. Obviously a little bit more about your leadership. What inspired you in the first place to get into financial services or do the job you're doing? Where did that come from?
So the honest truth of how I got into the Bank of London was a phone call from our chief people officer that I knew from my time in Arla Foods. But I think now that I am in financial services, I find the exceptionally complex business really exciting. It's finance is just hard in many ways, right? And there are many facets, many aspects to it that just makes the problems more complex to solve. And I find that really, really fun to work in.
I think if you're that way inclined mindset-wise, then there's not much more complexity than a regulated entity,
No,
right?
exactly.
So,
back to that regulation, right? It's it just adds a fascinating layer.
Yeah. Well, if anyone can solve it, Nanna, I'm sure you can. So, the other part I wanted to explore with you was a little bit more around role models or who inspired you. You've been very successful in your career. So even your kindergarten teacher mentions very early on. So what was your inspiration?
I've always had really supportive leaders throughout my entire career, which is of course very fortunate because you need sponsors to get forwards or get upwards in any hierarchy. So that's really important to have. If I could mention some of the fantastic females that I have around me right now, because I am in a really, really good position where my direct manager, Rebecca Skitt, who's our deputy CEO, she is such a powerhouse, both in an inspiration, both her career and personality. It's really, really fantastic to work for her. I'm learning so much. We've also got Vanya Jusara, who actually she was the one who kind of took me into the company in the first place. She has intellectual capacity beyond most people that I experience, and is such a warm and fantastic leader. I also have some of my direct peers, Sally Singer, Charlotte Bullock, Hannah Soulsby, and Becky Connolly, that are fantastic females to have around me, and I think that makes it easier to perform in a firm when you have some good role models around you.
Yeah, and I think that peerage as well, that
That's fantastic.
They're there with you to support. That's really good to hear. So Nanna, I just wanted to get your final thoughts really. So what words of wisdom or any knowledge that you would impart on your younger female self or younger talent coming through, what would those words be?
So I would definitely say to them, say yes to all the opportunities. I think that's very important to do. Secondly, I would tell them to proactively manage their own careers. Your career is not just gonna happen. You have to ask for what you want. You have to negotiate your salary and not just expect for it to increase. I myself, when I was recently out on maternity leave, I proactively managed my career. I wanted a promotion, and being fortunate that I have leaders around me that believed in me, I did come back to a promotion.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much, which was of course fantastic to experience. Third, and definitely not least, I would tell my younger self and any younger generation to don't necessarily be discouraged by the loudest voices in the room. The loudest voices are not always the most intelligent voices. We have a saying in Danish where we say that empty barrels make the most noise.
That's a very good saying. Great analogy, actually.
Yes. And I wish I had heard that as a younger me, because you will experience loud voices speaking over you from time to time, and you should never be discouraged by that.
Yeah. I think that's a great parting word. So thank you, Nanna, and thank you for sharing your career and history and experiences with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Jill.